gentlemen, we have a packed house. I'm so excited and grateful. Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Peterson. I'm the director of the museum, or as I like to say, and it becomes more and more true, the chief, the cook, and the bottle washer. So we'll help you get chairs, and we'll also do the program. The first person I want to mention here is Belle Turner Lynch, who is somewhere in the audience, and who first mentioned the Moulthrop family to me about 2 years ago, I believe, and not realizing that they were neighbors in Marietta. I started this wonderful journey of learning about them. I know that a lot of you are collectors and big fans, so you know much more than I do in a 2-year span, but it's been delightful to get to know them. Also the Firestones, I'm not sure if they've made it here this evening. Stan and Stella Firestone, whose collection is on view. Of course, Ms. Turner Lynch and others have their works in the collection. We also have one that our president, Larry Shaw, has in his office that's beautiful, made from a tree that was felled on this campus. So we have an Oglethorpe connection as well. But you'll see bowls such as this one, made by Ed Moulthrop, that was the very first that was collected by the Firestones, and each one has a personal story. I don't want to go too much into it because they will certainly show you. This is our only lecture this semester about Moulthrop, but we are giving tours all semester. I encourage you to come back and come through the exhibition with me. Our next event will be on Sunday the 26th at 4 o'clock with Brent Runnels, who is one of our music professors and also happens to be the artistic director of Jazz Atlanta. He'll be performing accompanying Wanda Yang Temko, the soprano, who's going to be performing on the 26th at 4 here in Skylight. And we've got a long series of beautiful lectures which accompany John Daniel Tilford's show, Hattie Saucy, a retrospective that was several years in the making and is about 30 years overdue. So an incredible Savannah artist. And we're celebrating all things Georgia tonight. So Philip and Matt Moulthrop are here, the second and third generations of wood turners who are in Marietta. I have learned that they are the gold standard of wood turning in the country, and they are in our backyard. We're very, very lucky to have them here. Thank you, gentlemen.
I'm Philip Moulthrop, and it's my son Matt. And as we said, we're a second, third generation wood turning that my father started back in the 50s. So we're going to kind of walk through how we do this work, like in our studio, and how we start out with a piece of wood like a log and end up with pieces like you see here. So that's kind of our control.
And we'll field some questions through this. You'd like to ask.
At the end, then we'll take time to. This is where we store our basic material in the back. So this is logs. Look back there, kind of piled up in a mess, but we kind of know where everything is.
Most of what we use is from native to the southeast. We'll work with any material that essentially grows out of the ground. People will send us wood from other parts of the country now, but in Metro Atlanta, even the southeast, we have pretty outstanding material for us to work with. This is the lathe that we work on. It was designed by my grandfather, and we've modified it a little bit, but it's still pretty much the basic model he created 50 years ago. This is the tools. The longest ones were actually handmade by him. Now we get foundries and CAD to create the tools for us to use.
The long ones are at length because we used your reach to get the insides of the bolts on there. The shorter ones are for working on the outside. So these are some of the shorter ones here.
Each piece you see in here was created with essentially 2 tools. We don't have a great palette. I'm always amazed when I see other woodworkers and what they use. We have a very simplistic approach. And that's let's see, basic tools here. The one on the near him, that was the lance invented by my grandfather. And then we've introduced the gouge. He did about 20 years ago.
This is typical bowl gouge, but a lot of turners use because it's got cutting edges here. This one is fluted. This one's not fluted, but it has cutting edge around it. This one. And the other one here is this hook tool that my father came up with the design, which we still use today. And this hook has a cutting edge all the way around that, but the hook size is probably about the size of your little finger. I mean, this is not a really big hook, but it can cut like almost quarter inch at a time. So the last one is a carbide disc, which is good for very hard woods and ones that have knots and are very aggressive. So.
And I only use the ones in the middle. I think you use all 4. That's just my approach.
Depends on the wood.
Any questions? So we do faceplate turning, which most lathes are. I'll start over. Most art forms are born out of utility. They painted thousands of years ago for communication. But wood turning was born out of functional utility. So my grandfather had the concept of creating sculptures, large scale, open form pieces, and that was part of the invention of this lathe. And so it only attaches on one end, and we use a faceplate that's bolted into the log. And we can turn green or dry, meaning that the tree was cut that day, or the piece of wood could be 1,000 years old. So it's science behind which stage we'll go through.
What you forget here is, this is the lathe. The motor is inside there, but it's basically just a box with a motor in it, and a belt. So we've got about 5 speeds, step pulleys. So the slow speed we've got is 72 RPM, so it's about like this, which is really slow, but if you have a really big piece of wood, it's fast enough until you get it round, then you go faster. And you look at here, this is a foot switch, so if you're holding on to this tool and something happens, it gets caught, you can use your foot to turn it off with, so that's very good. And then there's a tool rest here that you rest your tool on when you're doing the cutting.
How do you fasten the wood to that? I don't understand how that's. Where's the wood?
Well, there, I think what the next one has, you'll see it coming up here, but it's a plate, you'll see it right here. They're metal plates, but they have a screw thread on one end. That screws onto that shaft. And it has holes in it. And the holes put screws in it, and that screws it onto the wood, and then that whole thing gets screwed. So there's the plate, and you screw it on there.
And the different size plates, or face plates is what they're called, attached to the log, will depend on how large you can turn. So the small piece is always used to be very small. The largest one you can see here in the photograph is actually a gear from a motor. And so if you do something really giant, there's the physics of it.
Here you go. Screws on. This one other big difference between this kind of lathe and what a lot of people use is this lathe is open here. There's nothing in front of it. And so, like, if you're going to turn a table leg or something, we can't do that because we have nothing to support out here. So, but this works better for bowls because we have to work in the front of it. There's nothing in our way.
A particular piece of wood, this is called, actually it's made for box elder. It's got the red streaking. Eastern aguga is the scientific name. It's probably the most popular wood that we work in nationally. It's very uncanny to have that scarlet color in a wood that's native, but it's considered a trash tree. Looks like poison ivy as a sapling, but as a mature tree, it's really easy to identify in nature because when it forms a new limb, it's green. It's like a weed growing out of the trunk, and so it's very uncanny. But the red is certainly really spectacular for sculpture. We manipulate it, make it look different orientations, so that's part of the appeal of it. So that what he's tightening there is called the tool rest, which is indexed, meaning we have a pin that we move around so we turn on a filter. At this stage, that is a fresh log. meaning it is full of water. When I was learning with my grandfather, that was the first thing you did, was it was called rounding the log. So that from the rough form, you would completely round the surface of the log so there was nothing dangerous coming off, and then you could start the approach for the shape of the sculpture you're trying to achieve.
I had people ask me, so do you do the outside shape first, or do you hollow it out first? You really got to do the outside because you don't know how to hollow the inside out, so you don't shape your So it's watching this, cut a little bit one way, and then cut some on the back side until you get it, and then you stand back and you get it curved the way you want it. And here's the next step in here is where we're putting a hole down the middle. And that's to allow us to get one of our tools inside of that.
It's real easy. After this presentation, all of you should be able to do this.
We all expect to go do
Given the was after.
And most of it's turning directly to the log, in drain.
So the question was, is it end grain turning? Trees grow vertically. You can turn the piece on axis in the vertical grain, which is what's going on here. The pattern runs down. My grandfather turned exclusively end grain. We started turning off axis, meaning that the tree grows vertically. You can orient the log sideways and turn horizontally. And that's part of the artistry of it, because what you're trying to do is manipulate what nature has provided. That's the simple approach to turning. We can turn the entire trunk or a section, and it's always referred to steal from Da Vinci. It's a revelation process. We're revealing what's there. We're not adding, we're taking away. And so the final piece will only be as good as what nature provided us with.
And this is a bowl that after we shape the outside, file the inside out. It's taken off the lathe, and that plate's taken off. And you have what we call it, it's a rough bowl. It's the shape we want, but it's still thick. It's still half inch, 3/4 inch thick, and it has a lot of moisture in it. So it has to be cured and dried, and that may take 30 days to 3 months to get it dry. So we just kind of do them in order. And here's one of the steps. If it's hard wood, it tends to crack. So that may be like this sweet gum or oak or something. We can treat it in these water baths. And what this is it's full of water, and it's got water-soluble wax in there. And you put the pieces in with a date on it, and it stays in there a month or 2 or 3, and the wax slowly replaces the water near the surface of the wood, so that when it dries, it doesn't shrink and you don't have any cracking. But after 3 months in there, it's not saturated. It only goes in about 1/8 of an inch or something. It's just that's enough.
So what is cellulose? So it's a living material, and if you leave the pith, which is the center of the tree, in a rough form, it has to go through treatment. That's the nature of the trees we have in the southeast. And so if we go off axis, meaning we don't use the center, we don't have to go through treatment. And when they were in the early days, they put everything through treatment, and then as our knowledge grew, the science and the properties of wood, we've learned that not everything has to go through that, and that's been greatly helpful. We did a project with the Temple Gardens in Phoenix, where we did just desert trees, and nothing went through treatment. All the woods were bone dry. It was fantastic. So, but they were dense and oily, but it was grown under completely different conditions. In the southeast, we're technically in a rainforest, and so the moisture content in our trees is extremely. I'd say the highest would be poplar. The highest the moisture.
Now, this is a storage room. This is where all these bowls have all been in rough shape. If they were treated, they've been treated, they're totally dried out. And they can stay in there for years, and they don't change. They just stay just like they are. So when I finish a bowl, I'll go in here and I'll pick smaller ones, medium ones, and big ones, some out of the redwood, some out of some other kind of wood, another wood. Just so it's kind of a variety. This is where they're all stored.
It's hard to tell from this photo, but we could identify almost every species in there, what the color would look like. And that's identified actually even from the beginning. When we see a log, we'll know roughly how to approach the piece. That's one of the critical aspects to the sculpture. It's,
when you've got a rough piece of stock, do you approach it and try to conceptualize what shape you're going to try to get out of it? Or do you wait until you start to turn and then you see what the wood has to say to you about that?
it typically, you're reading the material from the beginning. And so you want to capture the best elements of that piece. There's a few exceptions where the wood is, you uncover something that was not foreseen prior to the outside, but typically I'm reading the color of the end of the log, the pattern, the growth, the grain, all those are factored into the final sculpture. And
I
so,
think that picking that is, if you go out there with a log and have a chainsaw, when you cut it with your chainsaw, you look at it first, see where the pattern is, you make a decision there, because every time you start doing another step, you're lessening all your choices, you're less and less choices. So you try to identify what you want to do right then. And of course, if you want to make an elliptical bowl that's have it wider, you're going to cut a piece that's shorter. You can't return that into a globe unless you make a really small globe and you turn it off and you have 3/4 of the wood. So it's better to know when you start, but don't, I keep that saying, you do run into some things as you're doing this and you realize, ooh, if I just do this, I can expose this part, and you can try to make a midstream change, but if you can do it from the beginning, it's better.
because you can't go back.
Do you go out in woods yourself looking for particular pieces?
I'm banned, of course. Now, I typically, what we're looking for is pretty obscure. It's conditions within wood that are not common, and so you need a source that sees a great deal of trees cutting to know not only is that unusual, but they would like this. And so we get a lot of wood from lumber yards, professional tree crews.
We get that almost all our wood because that's what it identifies the seed when it's cut. So if you saw a tree that was growing, you don't know what the pattern inside is. You just don't want to just take chainsaw and just go through the wood. You can do that all day and still not come up with what you wanted. Whereas when we associate with some of these tree cutters, we tell them what we're looking for and just tell them to be on the lookout. They cut a tree that has these colors or patterns, call us up.
So at this stage, the piece has been rough formed, dried, so we've been treated and dried. Faceplate has been remounted to it, and you're doing the final shaping. So you're wanting to hit the final curves of how the piece will be on the outside, and then you're retracing the contours of the interior walls, and a piece is turned thin enough that aesthetically it feels delicate when you touch it, but structurally it's still strong. And it's a tapered wall thinness so that as a sculpture it'll sit very stable. Because if it were uniformly thin, it would be too prone to tipping. And this is also where a piece can shatter. So the rough forming is not as common, but it does occur.
What percent of the time do you get a shattering?
I'd say less than 3%.
It's not as often.
You try real hard not to have problems.
We don't talk about it.
You have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I didn't quite understand. When you're going inside, how do you get it, your cutting to go create the inner bowl?
Because we'll use this. We'll use that hook tool. That's one of our main ones for inside. We don't use that on the outside. And because of the way it's shaped, you can reach in with that. As you go straight in, it'll cut the bottom as you just swing it around. The cutting edge stays in contact the whole time, so you can cut the whole. And you kind of, as you're cutting it, you watch how you're guiding the tool, and you're watching the outside shape of the bowl, so that hopefully you are following the exact contour the whole time.
You gonna show us that?
All right, you should have something. But of course, with its weight, it's like you can't see, but you can see right near the edge where it does that. So
But are you doing this by hand or is it still on the lathe?
it's all done on the lathe. All this is on the lathe.
But it is by hand, it's free form. So there should be one of them. Right, here we go. So, and
Right here's the tool, man. It's right here.
in
Which speed is that turning at?
Oh, I see.
That's that was probably going. This is on. I have two lathes, so this is the southern lathe. It's this built the exact same way. It just goes a little faster and it helps with sanding. But that one probably goes up to about 700 RPM, so it's fastest speed.
in the final shaping, when the piece is dry, you do want a faster speed. You're getting a very clean cut. And then you have to do sanding after that, which you want to minimize. But when you're turning on the inside of the hollow form, it is kind of an abyss. You're just it's instinctual because you don't know. But turning's rhythmic, so you can hear it, you can feel it. So as the material's being stressed down, the different sounds that come from it, and the vibrations from the wood itself. Different species of woods react differently. So the harder wood, they don't really even cut; they just kind of chip off like stone, and the softer ones tear like paper. So,
But also, if you're using like this hook tool here, which is one of our main tools, is you're cutting. You don't want to create steps because you'll end up the inside just rough. So you want to make smooth feathering cuts as you're doing it. If you do it right, you'll get it exactly following the outside contour.
It sounds like throwing a pot in ceramics. You gotta slowly build the wall and get smooth with your hand.
Is the hook tool the same one your father made?
It's the same one he came up with. His design.
It's his design, but somebody else has made it.
This one, yeah, we get this one from the foundry. They actually pour them and heat treat them for us, and they send them. We get they're about this long. The points are, and then we insert them in our tool shafts.
How often do you have to have a new point?
Well, of course you have to sharpen it or so that grinds it down. And if you get a nail, you can knock a big chunk out, and also break them because they're
they do break off.
Try to be careful, but I can probably go, 2 hours or so. I have to sharpen it again sometimes, or 3 hours. I mean, if it's soft wood, if you're doing really hard woods, you have to probably sharpen it more than that.
I put a brand new one in there and snapped it.
What's the material? What's the material? What material is it? What's the metal?
It's some sort of something like high-speed steel, I guess, is what they're using. I'm not sure the exact designation is what they call it.
It's a great question. One of them they charged us one. They called it M2. It worked a little better.
What would be your internal record-setting thinness that you managed to achieve?
Well, what I don't try to get it ultra thin, I try to keep it so it has some stability. I try to keep it maybe down to 3/8 or something on the sides. Some of it depends on the wood. Some wood is hard, or you can get it real thin. It holds together really well. But some of them are really soft, and they'll just shatter. They'll just come apart. It's just too much stress when you're cutting them. So
It's part of it's just a static feel. So it's proportional to the size of the piece. So a really giant piece, will have a much thicker wall structure than some of those miniature ones that you see in the cases. I mean, some of those are almost paper thin at the openings. And we use the same tools on the giant pieces as we do the small ones. So it's just resetting your approach. And the large pieces are meaning the larger ones are sculpted twice. And I'll use turning and sculpting obviously, but the small ones are turned start to finish on a single block of wood. And there's a size behind that because wood only dries at 1 inch per year at its thinnest dimension. So a 2x4 takes 2 years to dry. That's a rough wood. So you cannot dry a giant block of wood. But we could do a giant form, dry it, and then shape it back, dry a small block of wood, and create one piece from it in a single turn. I hate sanding.
It's probably the most boring step because it doesn't, the shape doesn't really change. I mean, the appearance is smoother, but it doesn't, there's not a lot of change. It's nice as turning the block of wood and getting a new shape out of it. It has to be done. It goes through about so I don't know. Probably
Put your hand inside the sand.
You do up to a certain point. Some of them are so large you can't reach. And then what we'll do is we can we use a scraper tools, which mimics sanding in some ways, but we use a rotational sander on the outside to help get the initial lines, and then everything is hand sanded. So it's the approach is still very simplistic in how we create. You know, it's very, very hands on.
This is the coating step. So after it's all been sanded, then it gets coated. This is a thicker coat. Usually the first coat is a very thin coat. It coats the thing. Of course, all the puppet colors you have pop out when you put the coating. And once we coat it once, then it has to be checked again for any cracks or little wormholes or anything to get it smooth, and then it's coated again. After on the third coat, it gets a thick coat like we just saw here. So it's sort of like putting on honey. It's kind of thick and it's evened out, and it's put on that machine here. And this machine rotates them at about 8 RPM, so it's going to go like this. And that way, if it's weren't quite even, it'll even itself out. And it sits on there about 4 hours or 5 hours.
And he invented this machine about 25 years ago. Yes.
What do you put it
That's a secret. It's a polymer. It's in the epoxy family. We have different.
Different formulations.
Yeah,
what we're trying to do with it, so we can make it go faster or slower or harder or softer or
Thicker, thinner. It's different. It's controlled according to the weather. There's factors that are variable, and it's got kind of a coefficient of expansion to it. This wood will breathe and contract, and so the finish will move with it, which is very helpful. It's not so hard that it'll crack.
Is it all oils?
Yes, clear.
You mentioned little wormholes and imperfections in the surface. Does that mean that the polymer coating fills those in, or do you have to go back and sand?
we have to fill it in.
You have to fill them
If there's a tiny crack, you put that on there when it dries, when it doesn't dry hard. You'll still see what the crack is still there, won't fill itself in. So you have to actually go in there. So what we do is when we're sanding, we save all of our sanding dust. We use that to push it back.
Wood, it's an imperfect material, so it's not. And we work with woods that were commercially used, or cherries, or oaks, or maples, but we also work with stuff that's considered just garbage, and so it behaves very badly. And so you have to factor that in and be patient. Cracks and imperfections are incorporated into a piece as long as it's not a visual impairment. If it looks like we glued the piece back together, it probably did. The final stage, toward the end after it's water, the piece is polished like glass. So the finish is actually sanded down, and then we've created our own compound because it's our own finish. And like I said, we create our own problems, so we have to create our own solutions. It's part of the fun of this, but it does mirror out like glass, as you can see in the end, and that's one of the ways you can tell the difference between the generations. And my grandfather was creating work. His finish had a very kind of satin kind of sheen to it. It wasn't, and I was always wanting to do something that was more glass-like, and that's what appealed to me.
Well, a couple of slides machine that had all the pieces rotating real slowly.